You're listening to Radio Azad, and this is your host, Aisha with Coffee Connection. And I have Snehal Kanitkar in the studio with me today. She is a licensed professional counselor. Feels good to say that. And we are going to be talking about perfectionism today. Whether you have it, somebody else who you maybe you're married to it. What happens? Why is it? What can we do about it? That's the topic for today. How are
Yes,
you?
I'm good. How are you, Aisha?
Very well. What is this bala? And especially I feel ke hamari community mein we have so many expectations
Yeah,
for perfectionism. So I know you're going to address that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's really important to talk about it, especially in our community. I think I think overall, society may there's an increase in perfectionism, right? But there are different types, and we'll get into that in just a bit. But one of the things that I find interesting about perfectionism is it's an unrealistic
Mm-hmm.
expectation,
Mm-hmm.
right? What does it mean when you're a perfectionist?
Mm.
It doesn't mean I like everything perfect. It means you have an unrealistic expectation of what you should be able to do and what should be able to be done, right?
I was going to ask
Yeah.
that because is it from yourself or do you expect the people around you also just to be perfect all the time?
So, yeah, that's one part of it, right? So, some scientists have broken it up into three different types of perfectionism, right?
Mm.
So, we have self oriented perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
which means I expect myself to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I expect myself to do everything just right, right? And then there is other oriented perfectionism, which means I expect others around me to be do everything just right and to be perfect in all ways.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that has to do with how people who reflect on us. So, for example, employees, maybe team members, family members, right? And that
Mm.
includes, even our own parents, not just our kids, right?
Ah,
Partner,
okay.
children, parents, it should all just be just right, right?
I
And
see.
then there is the social expectations, right? That type of perspective, socially oriented perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we are aiming for perfection because we think that is what is expected of us, right?
Oh, so like almost like society standards.
Yes, so it's very very fear based, right?
Mm-hmm.
कि अरे दूसरों को लगना चाहिए कि मैं perfect हूँ.
Oh,
So then that is that type. And I always find that it's so interesting that when we use the word, so many people are very proud of the fact
yeah.
मैं तो perfectionist हूँ,
Huh.
right? ये तो मैं तो इस चीज में मुझे perfect ही अच्छा लगता है.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a dark side to that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
yeah, have what do you think? Do you think that it's perceived as a very positive trait overall?
Oh, initially, absolutely. I hear it from people all around you कि अगर काम करना है तो perfect होना चाहिए,
Hmm. करना
right?
है तो ठीक करो वरना करो ही मत.
Huh. And people just have these incredibly unrealistic standards that they hold people to.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that's just so much pressure
Yeah.
on your relationships.
Yeah.
And I feel that especially where kids are concerned, that is a lot of pressure for the kids to handle as well when we expect a perfect 100 every single time and every single test.
Yeah.
But I also feel, Snail, that we have these standards for other people, but we never got 100 in our tests,
No, no,
right?
I certainly didn't. I never want to show you my mark sheet.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
then we expect perfectionism in other people in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, but we don't hold ourselves to those standards also.
Mm.
Sometimes I've seen people who do hold themselves to those standards suffer from analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
They can't get anything done
Yeah. Yeah. So
because it's,
that's the dark side of it, right? That's one
ah,
of the dark sides of it.
mm-hmm,
Um, One thing that we notice in our field is that people we see instances of depression,
mm,
anxiety. It shows up in OCD,
mm-hmm,
right? People who hold themselves to these standards of I need to be everything needs to look just a certain way or everything needs to be a certain way. That somewhere inside of them, can you imagine trying to uphold that at all times, right? It's exhausting and it's
wow.
not even humanly possible,
Hmm.
right? If you think about the visual that I always get in my mind is walking a tightrope, right? So when you walk, when you notice, circus में देखते हैं हम,
Hmm.
इंडिया में तो रास्ते पे fairs में भी होते हैं लोग ऐसे, but then you're walking on a tightrope, and yes, you have to have really great concentration for just that little amount of time.
Hmm.
You've got to be perfect, because one wrong step is going to send you down, right?
Yeah.
However, imagine walking on a tightrope all the time,
Wow.
right? How exhausting is that? Imagine just having कि भाई बस अब जिंदगी का सफर is just going to be on a tightrope.
Hmm.
How is that even possible? You're
Right.
not going to make it.
Hmm.
You're not going to make it. And just that, the anxiety that creates inside of us.
And I can imagine the burnout and not being able to do things because you probably have a fear of failure, and that
Yes,
fear is very intense.
that fear is very, very intense. So one side of, so perfectionism, one side of it is that we just keep striving, right? Karte raho until this is perfect. I'm not going to stop, right?
Hmm.
That leads to severe burnout, okay? Or it can lead to a lack of emotional intimacy with others when we are with our family, our friends, and if we're critical, or we're just like, nahi, ye theek nahi hai, right?
Hmm.
Have you ever met a parent who, बच्चे ने drawing किया या कुछ किया, painting, drawing, something, and they, before they comment on it, they just fix something quickly,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Quickly, अरे ये हाँ ये यहाँ रखो, हाँ अरे कितना अच्छा बनाया तुमने.
Or they take it over
They
sometimes,
take it
right?
over, right?
Yeah.
Right? What message are we sending the child
You're
when that
not good
happens?
enough.
It's not good enough, right?
Ah.
It's not good enough. And now I will make it right, right?
Hmm.
And at some point or the other, we may all be guilty of this, right? But when it becomes a pattern,
Mm-hmm.
what we learn is that, oh, when I didn't do it good, it had to be fixed, right? My worth is connected to how well I do something, or the perfection of how I do it, right?
So the message they probably get is not it's not good enough, but you are not good
I'm
enough.
not good enough. Exactly. I'm not good enough. And then that can lead to this insane striving, right? Just
Hmm.
this intense striving all the time, which leads to severe burnout. It makes you very distant from other people.
Mm-hmm.
You may be in a relationship, you may have relationships, but how close can you really get to someone
Hmm.
when you're not letting them see an imperfect side of you, or when you're afraid of how they'll judge the imperfect side of you, the human side of you, right?
Hmm.
And that leads to an intense this pull within us where, oh my god, I'm not connected to anybody. How sad is that, right?
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, how can I connect with anybody? Because what
They'll
if
see the
they,
true me.
yeah, they'll see the true me, and the true me isn't good enough.
Hmm.
And
What a
there's a
struggle.
deep sadness, a deep struggle right there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of it can show up sometimes as somebody who procrastinates a lot, right? Well, mhm. So, but sometimes that can be related to perfectionism, right? Ki, "Arey,
Right.
I'm putting it off for so long because if I do it, what if I don't do it right? Right?
Mm.
What if I don't do it just right? Not that it's just kar do, ho gaya, it's done, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if I don't do it perfectly?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to avoid it for as long as I can, and then I'll do it at the very last minute. मैं आय बोल रही हूँ ये भी सच है और काफी लोगों के भी लिए सच है. But if I put it off till the last minute, I can always say, oh, I didn't give myself enough time. This
Hmm.
is what I did in that. I just studied for an hour, and this was my result, right?
But there is a fine balance between getting the job done and getting the job done in a mediocre way
Mhm.
versus not getting the job done, procrastinating, like you're saying, and then you know having that standard for perfectionism. I think those two are like at odds.
They are at odds, right? And there you're bringing up is अंदर से आ रहा है आयशा. हमारी सोसाइटी के सब बोल आ रहे हैं
Uh-huh.
आपके अंदर से.
Yeah.
There's an adaptive perfectionism, right? There is no harm in striving.
Hmm.
There's no harm in being a high achiever. That's not bad, right? To be aiming for, oh, I want to do well, right? I want to get this right. I want to do the best I can, right?
Yeah.
Where's the definition of that though, right?
Hmm.
And how how much effort are you putting into it? Is it
Mm-hmm.
proportionate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So,
Yeah,
should we take a caller?
I'm more than happy to.
All right, Radio Azad, you're on the air.
जी सलाम वालेकुम
Walaikum assalam.
कैसी हैं आप दोनों
बिल्कुल ठीक, कैसी हैं आप?
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I was listening, and it is so close to home also. And I just wanted to say that अगर आपको कोई childhood trauma है about the perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
really for the adult also it is very hard. They also think, we have to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The other day something happened personally, and I have to tell my son, you have to repeat after me. I'm human, I can make mistakes. And he
Oh,
kept saying, no, I should be a robot, I should be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, like 10 times, and he kept saying, you are human, you can make mistakes. I said, no, you have to repeat after me. And unless he repeated after me, then I made him repeat after me 5 more times.
wow.
And I'm like, no, because in his head, it is still, he's like, Mom, you don't know how it is grinded in my head. If I want to, I can't. I can't. And then I told him, no, you have to change your thinking and tell yourself, I can, I will, I have to, I can, I will, I have to.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you need to stop saying that now that I can't, I can't, I can't. I'm a perfectionist. I have to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
तो
Yeah, that's
that
really powerful.
हाँ जी और मैं मतलब सिर्फ ये इंसरसाइज करना चाह रही हूँ कि एज अ पेरेंट हमारा कल्चर जो है हम लोग नहीं सोचते बोलने से पहले बच्चों को और how much it impacts to them, especially on the children who are more sensitive
Mm-hmm.
or they take the things close to them. There are children, they say, oh, we don't give a damn about it. I don't know, whatever they want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, लेकिन हम लोगों को make a conscious effort to speak to our kids before we say something like that also.
That's such a great point.
Yeah, really great
So I
point.
just wanted to share that and thank you very much for bringing these things on air.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
been great to hear you again, Shaidaji. The question that she raised, I've
Mm-hmm.
heard this from several parents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They say that, one parent is a perfectionist and demanding perfectionism from the child.
Mm-hmm.
How should the other parent handle it? Because I feel that a lot of women in our culture tend to back off
Yeah.
if the father is quite overbearing,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't take the side of the child,
Yeah.
and then that leads to so many repercussions as an adult.
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
should that how should the mother handle it?
That is it's such a multi-layered and such an important question, right? I think, of course, this speaks to so many different things. What is your relationship like, right? Can you speak up? Are you willing to risk some things, right? Because
Mhm.
remember, when you bring something up, when you kind of challenge the status quo, right, there will be some conflict, there will be some discomfort in the home for a little bit of time.
Mhm.
If you can overcome that, then the next step to think about will be maybe start challenging that in, verbally, yes, right, but even in your own behavior. So first of all, I think one thing to think about is, okay, agar, what is the fear कि अगर ये परफेक्ट नहीं हुआ या नहीं हुई, इसके ग्रेड्स perfect nahi hue, or if this XYZ is not reached, right? There's always some kind of a fear underneath that maybe the one parent has,
Mhm.
that if you don't do this, then you are not going to reach the level of success
Yeah.
that I have envisioned for you, right? Or that even more insidious is that I believe you can reach, right?
Mm.
तुम्हारा पोटेंशियल है, लेकिन अगर ऐसे ही करते रहोगे तो यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू रीच इट, राइट? That statement sounds like it is a a kind statement. It is not a kind statement. It is a statement that has there's a motive underneath it, right? You're like, it's a little bit of a manipulative statement, right?
Acha.
You can believe in your child's potential,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And you can also say, what do you need to reach the next step, right?
mhm, mhm.
If you're getting, okay, if you're trying to say कि hundreds अगर नहीं आए, 99 क्यों आया, वो एक point कहाँ गया? We make it
Yes.
I know that a lot of us in our community, we make a joke about it, that when
Mhm.
I told my mom that I got a 99, she didn't say, oh, great job. She said, where did that 1 point go?
Go.
And it's supposed to be a joke, but a lot of kids, at that point, they're looking for that validation.
Mm.
Look how hard I worked, right?
Yeah.
Look how well I understood this. But when you just talk about what's missing,
Mhm,
what do you get from it, right?
mhm,
So I think as a parent, so going back to the what would you tell your partner, how would you approach this, right?
mhm,
Number one, be willing to create a little bit of discomfort in the home at that point, right? We're
mhm,
not throwing things, we're not going on a fast or anything like that. We're not doing that, but at the same time, speaking up for what you believe in is going to create some discomfort. Number two, kind of talk about that fear कि अगर ये नहीं हुआ तो ये होगा, right? Let's help this child work towards what his or her best is,
mhm,
maybe not what we believe it should be, right?
mm,
Maybe start talking about, where are we flawed as human beings? Where are we human, right?
mhm,
And when we expect, one thing that I always tell parents who are like, नहीं मैंने ये सब, देखो मेरा करियर ये है, मैंने ये सब perfectly किया, so my child should also be like this,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
One thing I always tell parents like that is, you are imperfect in the way you're creating relationships,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Look at is your relationship with your child perfect? Is your relationship in your marriage perfect, right? Why are you willing to accept imperfection there when you're asking for perfection in the way the world is going to see you, right?
mm.
Society ki aankhon mein perfection dekh rahe ho, but not in the closest relationships.
Right.
All right. And that is something that I think sometimes shocks people to hear.
Mhm,
It's not something anybody wants to hear. But finally, when you're choosing perfection in one realm,
mhm.
you are choosing to let go of something else,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what causes somebody to be like this?
Wow. So many different things, right? So as always, genetics plays a part, right?
Mm.
There are some theories, in fact, that it starts from the womb, not just, our experience is implicit memories in the womb.
Really?
Yeah, there are
Oh.
some theories that relate to that.
Mhm,
There is a genetical component to, how it's called neuroticism, which is a personality trait, but just how everybody is born. You've seen, you have 3 children, all of them were different,
so
right?
different.
So different. Even as babies, you didn't
Mm.
even influence them at
Yeah.
that point, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's born with a certain level of मुझे इतना चलेगा इतना नहीं चलेगा,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And everybody's is different, but the most important factor here is nurture, right? how
Mm.
how they're raised, what they see around them, what messages they're receiving, and how they're feeling about themselves,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So if somehow through messaging, through parenting, through their experiences at school, if they get the message that their worth is tied into
mhm,
their performance,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
That can start this cycle of, I'm not good enough until I do this perfectly. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, why we've talked a little bit about this, but
Mhm.
why is it a problem to have these perfectionist traits?
Yeah. So why is it a problem, right? You'd be like, oh, kyun nahi? Because getting 100 is great, and always
Mm.
doing something perfectly is great. The problem is just like thinking about that tightrope, right? When you're on a tightrope for a little bit of time, wonderful, right? Great. You made it to the other side. When the tightrope is your life, you are going to feel anxious, you're going to feel depressed, you're going to be far away from other people, right?
Mhm.
It's going to lead to issues inside of you that show up in different realms, right?
Resentment.
Resentment, right? And it
Mm.
shows up when you least expect it. Can
Yeah.
lead to anger issues,
Mhm.
right? One of the things that it can lead to procrastination, right?
Mm.
And that leads to even less, here you go into that self-worth cycle, right,
Yeah.
which goes worse and worse.
Mm.
In my own experience, one of the things that I find the most distressing about perfectionists is this lack of emotional intimacy in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
um, let's look at, even if we take the big examples away, right,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at a small example that sometimes can show us how easy it is to drive away other people, right? um, if you've ever had guests coming over, right, and many of our listeners may align with this or not, but if you've ever had guests coming over, party chal rahi hai, kuch bhi ho, right? Isn't it wonderful when people can just walk in and out of your house and like, okay, aa rahe hain log, you form such a great, what a
Yeah.
wonderful sense of community, right?
Mm.
Log hai meri life mein.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel like I cannot let people through that door
Mm-hmm.
unless my home looks a certain way, right?
That's a great example.
Right. When you cannot let them through that door unless everything looks just so,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing to your friendships? What are you
Yeah.
doing to your sense of
It's a
community?
facade. Then how do they
It's a facade.
actually connect with the real
Yeah.
you?
How do they connect with the real you, right?
Mm.
And I'm not by any chance saying we should have, cobwebs in the corners and clothes should be everywhere. But life, normal life, में
Yeah.
सबके घर जैसे लगते हैं, right?
Uh-huh.
Sometimes there is a pile of laundry on the couch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes there are undone dishes in the sink.
Mm.
Sometimes your floors are covered in dog hair, right? and, uh, and that's okay.
Mm.
That's okay. If we can't let people in, we're also telling them, don't let me in unless your home is perfect, right?
So vulnerability is one of
Vulnerability.
the cornerstones of how people connect with each other.
Yeah, yeah,
तो अगर वो आपने eliminate कर दिया, एक एक facade आप present कर रहे हो,
yeah,
so they're not reaching inside जो truth है आपकी,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. That sometimes I'm a human being, right?
Hmm.
I'm a human being all the time, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm a human being that is walking that tightrope well. Sometimes I'm on the ground and
Hmm.
walking normally without, all these pressures on me.
Right.
And
Right.
that's okay. That's
Exactly.
really, really okay.
It's funny because people tell me, they see me at all these different exhibitions and
Mm-hmm.
social media, and they're like, "Oh, तुम तो बहुत busy हो." और मैं कहती हूँ, what you see on social media is not how I live my life.
Yeah.
90% of the time, I'm home on my rocking chair in my PJs, and I may be doing my work, but I may be just watching a game or something.
Yeah. Yeah. As
But
you should be.
that's me.
That's me, right? And then when people see you like that, if you were the type of person that was like, huh, aise hi jeena chahiye, right? Then
I do have bad hair days. I do.
yes, yes. And then people kind of see that and they think that that is what is expected of them.
Yeah.
Builds up a lot of shame, right? It's the
Yes.
opposite of vulnerability, shame,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, we have that shame, we have that inner critic that's like, oh, not good enough. Try hi mat karo, right?
Mm.
Sometimes, as I was coming here, I was thinking to myself, Aisha, if I lived in this fear, right, of who knows how this interview is going to go, right? This time with Aisha, I could totally mess up. I could forget everything. I could fumble my words and make the wrong analogy.
Never.
Everything could
Never.
happen.
Hmm.
No, it happens often. But if I lived with that fear, if I thought to myself, ki, yahi hai, oh my God, what if it's not just right, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I wouldn't have come.
Yeah.
I would never try, right? I would never show up.
Exactly.
And many times just showing up is enough. Trying. And trying, it's such an interesting Star Wars fan. Anybody?
Yeah.
There you go.
Me, a whole family.
The whole family, right? So we have do or do not. There is no try, right? Yoda,
Yoda.
statement.
Hmm.
And I think that is such an important statement because it can be taken in different ways, right?
Hmm.
So one way is to say, oh, try karna hi mat, theek se karna ho to karo, right?
Hmm.
Trying doesn't mean doing it perfectly. You are doing it, right? Even when you are not sure of what the result is going to be, you
Hmm.
are doing it. Stop looking at it as, oh, I'm just going to try. मैं थोड़ा सा देखती हूँ, करती हूँ, right? No, you're doing it or you're not doing it, right?
Mhm.
Don't think about I'm doing it perfectly or I'm not doing it, right?
Right.
It's the in the
Absolutely.
doing that
Matters.
living really happens,
I love
right?
it. I
Yeah,
love it.
right.
What about people who they are perfectionists and they tend to get hypercritical? Of
Yeah,
is that like also part of and parcel of what being a perfectionist is all about?
absolutely. That's that other oriented perfectionism, right? When you're
Hmm.
expecting others to reach this unrealistic standard,
Mm-hmm.
right? That usually points to somebody who's very critical of themselves
Mm-hmm.
internally as well. Or it's a defense mechanism. It's really very fear based, very, very protective internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're trying to show a certain side of you, and you're trying to say, and it's very socially sanctioned, right? It's very socially sanctioned कि अरे perfection expect करना इसमें कोई बुरी बात तो नहीं है, right?
Hmm.
They just want what's best for me,
Right.
or they just want they have high standards.
Hmm.
But if that high standard is causing you distress again and again and again, right? It's is it worth it, right? What are
Hmm.
we choosing?
Hmm.
Always think, what am I choosing, right?
Right.
What if I'm choosing one thing, I'm giving up something else, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Because then um, somebody who is experiencing that constant criticism does not want to be around you then,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Oh, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of just like moving away from that relationship.
yeah. It's not going to create a good relationship, right? It's not inspiring to be
Hmm.
critical, right?
Right. And I feel we do this with our kids, especially our daughters.
Oh, yes.
The sons, you just let everything go. But with the daughters, they just have to, be perfect all the time.
All the time, yeah. And what are we perpetuating when we do that, right?
Yes.
It's not a positive, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not a positive thing at all. And when we expect that from our kids, one of the other fallouts from that, right, is we get a person, let's say a child is in our control, right, for many many years.
Mm.
We are hierarchically higher than the child, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How we use that is very very important, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we now expect perfection from a child,
Mm.
right? And if we say, nahi, ye karoge, come back to me when you get that 100, right? When we are withholding affection, withholding love, right? We can always tell them, here's how we can move forward. Here's how वो 92 आया, अब 93 कैसे लाएंगे, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first, let's focus on the joy of that 92, right?
Yeah.
Let's focus on the joy of that 89, right? Oh, so wonderful, right? What did you do to get here? Focus on the work that brought them to that place, right?
Interesting.
Let them bring up, okay, I know that, that one night that I didn't study at all and I watched the game, I think I could have focused on that one chapter that I missed. Maybe next time I'll remember that, right? Let them come to that conclusion. And
Mm.
trust me, kids are thinking all the time, but let them come to it on their own,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Let them come to it on their own. Okay.
Right.
And the other thing is, when we start imposing these, अरे इनके बच्चों को ये आया, why can't you do that, right? Or she did this, why can't you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we telling them? That it's important how things look, right? What are we creating? We're creating a child or an adult that only does enough. They might resort to lying, they might resort to hiding, they might resort to not trying if they don't think they can reach that level, right?
Yeah.
we're
Just
creating someone that's going to we're creating a mindset, right? That it's more important what people think, what people see, than what's actually happening inside of you.
yeah.
Your lived experience is less important than falana person's experience of you,
Oh,
right?
that's such a great point, Snehal.
Yeah,
I feel also we tend to base our love for people and even our kids based on what they have done, what they have achieved,
yeah, yeah,
right? The golden child is the one who does is the straight A child or the
yeah,
high achiever. What about the one who's has different talents or different abilities?
yeah, yeah,
Why do we have to tie how they are doing what they are achieving to how much we love them.
Yeah.
What about their intrinsic place in our life?
Just love unconditionally, right?
Yes.
Why are all these conditions? Why do we feel that our love needs to be tied to conditions? Where did we learn that, right?
Hmm.
And many times, especially culturally, there's something that says कि अगर if you give that love away,
Hmm.
right, quote unquote for free, yeah, unconditional is considered like free love, right?
Yeah.
If you give that love away, what is the child striving for? Why would they work, right? Why would they even try and achieve anything?
Mhm.
Gosh, that breaks my heart when I think about it,
Yeah.
right? Because we're kind of, this is woven into us many times,
Mhm.
right? But why, right? Let them, all plants grow the way they're supposed to grow, right?
Yeah.
We just need to give them sunlight and water. वो
Hmm.
sunlight उनको free में मिल रही है, फिर भी they're growing because they're getting the sunlight for free,
Such a
right?
great point.
Yeah. They don't, we see weeds growing out of cracks in the cement. Every plant will grow
Mhm.
the way it needs to grow. Every being is looking to grow,
Mhm.
right? They just need that free sunlight.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what are you doing to stunt that growth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it that quest for perfectionism
Mhm.
and all the other things that,
Yeah.
that we do?
And we have a lot of fear inside of us, Aisha. We
Yeah.
feel this
Yeah.
fear is so intrinsic.
Mm.
Generations, DNA में woven है वो fear,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Intergenerational trauma is a thing.
Is a thing, right? अगर if I, and especially immigrants, right?
Yes.
Especially हमारे इस देश में, where we are just, you have to work twice as hard to be considered half as good,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And we are the model minority and all those other things, but it's such a difficult thing to overcome.
Hmm.
But it starts with us, right? How can we overcome it? How can we look inside ourselves? And how can we give ourselves some compassion and some grace? Ki, ha, ye, I did this good enough. And if you don't like the term good enough, right? Many perfectionists don't like the term good enough.
Yeah.
Think of it. I heard someone say, this is awesome enough, right? This is great enough,
Right.
right? But it's enough.
Right. So is it that perfectionists don't know where to draw the line? For example, there is, let's say, when you're revising a paper
Mhm.
and you look at it and you're like, okay, I need to look at it again, and you revise it again, and you
Mhm.
revise it again, and you
Yeah.
revise it again. And is it that they don't know where to stop and say, okay, I think this is it? I mean, you can keep revising it,
Yeah.
but then there comes a point where you're like, अब बहुत हो गया.
Yeah. अब बहुत हो गया. They don't know where that line is. Yes. And they keep moving the line.
Ah.
Right. So if they think, okay, I just need to make sure I know that my points are fine, right?
Hmm.
Because I've been working on this for a bit. I know my points are fine. I know that I have all the, you know, references in the back, everything is fine. I'm just going to go in and quickly check spelling mistakes, right?
Hmm.
Okay, जाके एक बार spelling mistakes सब double check किए. Then they move the post. They're like, okay, एक बार spelling check हो जाए, then I will go ahead and submit.
Mhm.
Then they're like, oh, I have another half an hour to submit. Let me go back and look one more time. And now I'm going to check for grammar, okay? And then grammar check kar diya. Oh, I have a little more. You know what? I'm going to go in and make sure that this argument flows properly, right? And that my conclusion is right. Okay, now what's happening when you keep moving the goalpost?
Yeah.
You have created so much self doubt. Oh my God, when I went back and checked for the grammar, I did find one mistake, right? Oh, when I went back and checked for a flaw in the way my argument was flowing, I realized, oh, this could have been said differently, right?
Mhm.
Yes, but was it awesome enough, right? Maybe it could have been done differently, but
Right.
is this okay? It's absolutely okay. How much distress are you causing yourself? And kya hota hai, Aisha, in this, when you complete something, there is no joy. There is
Mm.
no joy of achievement. It's just relief
Yeah.
of, okay, now it's out of my hands, right? But there's no joy. That again breaks my heart, right? To think about
Yeah.
doing something and working so hard without any joy.
How do you fix yourself?
Mhm.
And how do you realize that this is something that is a trait in you,
Yeah.
and maybe you are doing this with the relationships around you? So how do you pull back?
How do you pull back? Work with a counselor. No? That is always a good step. But
Mhm.
if you want to start doing some work on your own, right? One of
Mhm.
the things to think about is start noticing, where am I holding myself to unrealistic standards, right?
Mhm.
Notice these thoughts inside of yourself. And then notice where you start arguing with yourself. कि ये अनरियलिस्टिक थोड़ी है,
Mhm.
बर्तन तो नहीं होने चाहिए सिंक में.
Mhm.
देन स्टार्ट थिंकिंग, वेयर इज दिस मैसेज कमिंग फ्रॉम? हाँ, मेरी अम्मी के घर में कभी बर्तन नहीं थे सिंक में, राइट?
Acha.
Or my mother-in-law had once criticized me when there there were some dishes in the sink.
Okay.
Or my grandmother had criticized my mother. Or my
Mm.
father had said something once, right?
Okay.
About how sloppy this was. This
Mm.
is, a silly small example,
Mhm.
right? But it's interesting how these thoughts are woven. One thought doesn't exist on its own.
Mhm.
There are so many different layers to it, so many places that it comes from. And it's really important to start noticing how we're talking to ourselves before we notice how we're talking to others.
Others. Huh.
We're really, really harsh on ourselves many, many times, right?
Mhm.
And then it's important to start saying, well, what can I do? What am I afraid of? Oh, log hasenge, or somebody will think I'm a slob, or somebody will think that I don't have my life together, right?
Mm. Mm.
Somebody will think I'm lazy. What's the word that's really fear, what are you afraid of, right? And then starting to maybe work about, like, okay, ek cup mein rakhungi andar. Bas. That cup will not get washed. See how that feels,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very difficult process, but starting with just examining what's happening in your own mind and where you're placing value on something, but then where are you taking value away from, right?
This is not a license for the team to leave their dirty dishes in the sink.
नहीं ये मत करना. Yeah.
Okay, so these are a lot of self reflection and self analysis. And yeah, you're absolutely right that we tend to be our own worst critics sometimes.
We really are. We really are. And that drives us, right? The
Mm.
criticism, when criticism drives us,
Mhm.
that's not a happy place to be, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's kind of like, I always think of the example of the carrot and the stick, right? Or the stick and the carrot, right? So we're thinking, am I moving towards something that feels good, or am I moving away from something that feels bad, right? So
So is that a good approach or not a good approach?
we don't want to move away from something that's bad all the time. There are some things, of course, we're going to be,
Hmm.
I don't want an accident, so I'm going to drive safely,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Yes, of course, that makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then also, oh, and I want to get to my destination and enjoy, right, without thinking of, oh, I
Yeah.
had a fender bender or this and that. uh, Driving may not be the best example there, right? But when we think about a life situation, hey, I'm going to take a course in, I'm taking a class, right? Oh, I want to get an A because that will tell me, oh, that means I understood what was going on, right?
Hmm.
That means
Hmm.
at least 90% of what I was taught,
Mhm.
85% of what I was taught, I really got it, right? Not, oh my God, if I get that 84, right, or an 80,
Hmm.
people will think like, ye kyun padhne gayi abhi,
Hmm.
right? What
Hmm.
was the point of this? How
Yeah.
silly. Usne kabhi kuch kiya hi nahi. If I'm doing it out of fear, I'm not going to enjoy the result. I'm not going to enjoy finishing that class and learning something new,
Hmm.
right?
Interesting. All
Yeah.
right. This is all great information. Anything else that we have not covered or you want to add?
Um, so many things, right? But
A huge topic.
it's a huge topic. I'll leave you hanging so that you call me back, Aisha.
Oh.
I do think that self reflection is the most important thing, right?
Hmm.
And it shows up in so many different ways. One thing I also, if you don't mind me giving one more
Please.
point of self reflection for
Uh-huh.
people,
Hmm.
one thing that we all tend to put ourselves, a little box we put ourselves in, is emotional perfectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
I should always be happy. I should always think good thoughts. I should always
Wow.
be aiming for good things.
Always be positive.
Always be positive, right? And we know the toxic positivity and all of that.
Mm.
But that's emotional perfectionism, right?
Mhm.
Where, oh, these are the bad emotions. वो नहीं दिखने इधर, right? That doesn't stop you from feeling all the negative emotions,
ठीक
right?
है,
Feel
ठीक
तो कर ही रहे हैं हम. It's not negative unless I start putting that value on it,
है.
right? Allow yourself to feel the whole rainbow of emotions, right?
Okay.
See what that brings up in you.
Mm.
Are you feeling guilty because of that? Do you feel bad? Do you feel like you're doing something wrong, right?
So when you do that self analysis, what do you think should be the aha moment that, oh, you've crossed that line, you are a perfectionist rather than just somebody who has high standards?
Yeah, think about that. We're looking for happiness, we're looking for joy, right? Is something bringing you some level of satisfaction? Let's
Mhm.
take the joy out of it. Joy bahut dur ki baat hai. Let's bring satisfaction. Are you
Mhm.
feeling satisfied when you do something, right? हाँ,
Mm.
ये satisfaction. Or are you just feeling thoda bhi और भी, right?
Mhm.
Is it bringing you distress on a daily basis, right? Are you constantly feeling like you're not enough, right? That's where you have now crossed the line, right?
Uh-huh.
That's where, when you're causing yourself pain and when it's affecting your relationship with others,
Mhm. And you're causing others pain.
yeah,
Yeah.
never a good way to be in a relationship, right?
Mm.
That's where you've crossed a line.
All
Yeah.
right, great information. Would you like to give out your information about your any numbers, emails, anything,
Yeah,
websites?
sure. If you can Google Metta Counseling, Metta Counseling in Texas. That's my little practice in Frisco, and I love working with people. And even if I always tell everybody that calls me, even if you end up not working with me, if I'm not the right fit for you,
Mm.
please reach out if you're looking for a counselor, right? I want our community to feel comfortable doing that. Reach out. I will see what I can do to help you find a counselor who's a good fit for you. It's not necessary that you work with me. I may or may not be the right fit for you,
Mhm.
but I will try my best to help you find someone who is.
All right, Meta Counseling.
Metta.
Okay, MET Meta Counseling dot
MettaCounselingTX.com.
OTX
Yeah.
dot com. Perfect. Thank you so much, Snehal,
Thank
our
you.
licensed professional counselor, for being on the show and giving us such a great, candid conversation on perfectionism.